who you marry, the job you have. But if you don't have a purpose, it's so painful because you're constantly testing for the lock that you're the key to open that future. And our next guest is just an amazing testimony of somebody who had that problem at a young age. She didn't have a purpose. And here's the problem when you're a female and you don't have a purpose. You start looking for a purpose in men and in other people and in other relations. And then you'll find yourself being a victim of abuse, sexual abuse. You find yourself being involved in drugs and even in abortion. And those leave deep scars. Now you have two choices with that. You can allow that to define who you are, or you can allow it to define your purpose. Okay, and your purpose is to take the pain, the experience, everything you have and say, I went through this, but I went through it, and somebody else is not going to go through it because they're going to learn from me. And our next guest, Mechelle Stevens, is an amazing testimony of a lady who has taken her life, found her purpose, and structured it in such a way that she now helps others to find a purpose. Her ministry, Watch God Work Ministries, is an incredible tool that God is using as she is an author and a speaker and travels throughout the country now speaking to people, helping them find their purpose. Let's join Mechelle Stevens.
Yes, welcome, Mechelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have you with us.
I know. I'm always amazed, especially you're so beautiful and all pulled together, an author and a speaker and a life coach, and there's so much more to the story. Yes, and you're a true survivor. So tell us,
Well, at first I want to say it is amazing that how God has woven the themes. And when we first got on the set and came in, Lexi was all bubbly, and I heard one of your cast members say, wow, they're all like that tonight. And I'm talking about the guest that's going to be on the show. But once you've come to a place of restoration and redemption, you have a joy that's on the inside. And tonight, all those guests, we're talking about restoration and transformation. And it's just a theme on tonight, how, you know, like you said, Rick, I was totally lost, didn't know my purpose. And when you don't know your purpose, you are a victim of all those things. And addiction, my drug of choice was promiscuity. And people don't think that's a drug, but that was a drug. And it all started from an unwanted touch at an early age.
At 5?
Yes, at the age of 5. By a family member. And then again, it progressed to 8 and then 12, and those unwanted touches, and then, you know, molestation. And then I started to look for love, and I didn't know what it looked like, what it felt like. And anything that looked like it, felt like it, I found myself drawn to it. No matter how abusive it was, I found myself, you know, being a victim of abuse and sported the black eyes. And it was a progression. I knew God at the early age, 15. Baptized. I always knew it was something different about me, but I allowed life to dictate to me, you know, this is what you should do and this is your purpose. So I was drifting. And when I go back and I read the book, I say, who was this girl? I don't even recognize her in the book. And she needed a second chance, a third chance. And when I got here, I was saying, you know what, there's no throwaways in God. And then your husband said that, there's no throwaways in God. And he is, and I read a book called Nobody's Child. It was about a lady who spent about 20 years of her life in a psych ward. Now she graduated from Harvard and she goes back teaching about mental illness. But she summed up in her book a quote that I've adopted for myself. And it says, I believe my life with all its suffering has been guided by divine providence, that I might turn that suffering into a positive, constructive force. And that's what God has allowed me to do. And I'm telling you, I'm reaching back, trying to get those without hope, to let them know there is hope. I'm trying to get the ones who themselves deem unlovable, as well as others deem unlovable, and let them know that there is a God that loves you, no matter what you've done. You know, because I wore the scars. I wore the scars.
Right, and a lot of people, especially if they have an abortion at a young age, they go through life and they just stuff it down. But it leaves that deep scar, and then it manifests itself in depression, wouldn't you agree, and so many other ways?
Yes, it did. At the age of 16, I was dating out of wedlock, I got pregnant. I was dating a young guy whose dad was a deacon in the church. And he called me, said we prayed about it. And I was like, oh, wow, prayed about it. And we'll pay for your abortion. And I fell into it, and I thought that would be the solve-all to everything. Thought I would get up, brush myself off, you know, go on living life. Man, how wrong I was. It was depression, suicidal, And I look now back at how close I was. Had God not kept me, no idea where I would be.
There's no natural instinct in a woman that says I should kill my child.
No.
There's none. So you're literally overcoming every motherly instinct in your body to, you know, allow this to happen.
But how interesting too, the spiritual manipulation.
Yes.
To come, because you're supposed to trust the deacons. You're supposed to trust, if someone says we've been praying about this.
I don't know what God they prayed to, but it wasn't mine. I can
So
tell
you're
you
dealing
that.
with that whole spiritual side of it as well.
Now, let me ask you a question. Did that change the scope of how you looked at the church
It
at that
did.
point?
Of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. About 2 weeks after that had happened, I went back to talk to the young guy.
Okay.
And his dad, you know, he said, would you take me to church? And I was like, oh, sure. And that, again, respect and authority. And we rode, and he was so nice and so cordial, and he apologized for what I was going through.
Okay.
Pulled up on church ground, and was nobody there. And I was like, you asked me to bring you to Bible study, and what is going on? So while we sat in the church parking lot, he took his hand, rubbed it up my leg, and molested me on church ground. At that point, I vowed I would never, ever step into church again.
Right.
I said, if that's the way church people are, I would rather be outside with my God. But as God would have it, he led me a church in Marietta where healing was the theme.
Wow.
And they take the brokenhearted, show them love, and love is the theme of the church. And I needed that. I couldn't even let the pastor hug me.
Of course.
Because
you don't trust. Well, how did you even get there? Did someone invite you? Because I'm curious, after all of that, how did you even go in the doors?
I would go on to churches, what they call on high days,
Okay.
Easter.
Yes. Christmas.
And I would sit in the back.
Okay.
Because as soon as it was over,
You're
I
out.
was out of there.
Okay.
I didn't want anybody to hug me.
Right.
Don't tell me that you love me, because you don't even know what love looks like.
Right.
And so one day, I stayed. And I met this young lady. I knew I always had a calling on my life, though. And so I knew God needed more from me. So I just stayed. And then the church that day, the lady was preaching, women, God is in need of you. Women, God. And I was like, whoever she talking to, I wish they would answer, because I'm tired of hearing it.
Right.
And on the way home that night, in a vision, God spoke to me and told me that was what I was called to do. It was no turning back. I accepted my calling, and from then on I was preaching and teaching, and in that time I was writing the book, Unmasking. And when it came out, my pastor was so brave to let me discuss some of the topics that churches don't necessarily let.
But they need to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was so brave. And when I read it, the devil said, you're never going to preach again in that pulpit.
Wow.
The next day, the mothers of the church was like, Mechelle, what are we going to do with this book? So many people need healing.
Yes.
I'm so glad you told your story. And then some of the mothers in the church was like, some of that was my story. I was too afraid to tell it.
Right.
And so I found that people have begun to unmask. And when they begin to unmask, people are being so healed.
Yes, freedom and
Freedom.
peace comes when you unmask and get rid of all that stuff that you've stuffed down. How did you forgive those who hurt you?
At first, it was superficial.
Okay.
When you were young, okay, I'm fine. I forgive you. You didn't mean to. But then I got to a place that I needed healing. And the more that I held on to it, the more that I didn't truly forgive, I could feel myself continue to go to depression, suicide. And then once I just said, God, would you please take it away? Let me forgive. And I truly forgave. And then I was able to hug that same person.
Wow,
Yeah,
Mechelle.
yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is a story of hope and restoration
Yes, it
as
is.
well,
Yes,
saying
it
that
is.
you can, no matter your deepest scars, your deepest wounds, you can be healed, have joy and freedom, and turn it into something amazing, like your book. I know you said you wanted to share something
Yeah,
out of
I
your
did.
book, too.
This is truly a love story, because in all of my attempts to find God, I was always at the church, just trying to find God.
Sure.
And one day at church in choir, I just took my hand and ran it down the hymnal. And it was a poem that God gave me, and it says, the cross on my hymn book. I held in the hands the cross on my hymn book that I've always used. But this time, I had a different view. I saw a cross engraved so deep. As I ran my fingers upon it, I began to weep. From the top, I could feel his head. Instantly, I thought about the blood he shed. I ran my fingers gently to the right side. Then I remembered, Oh, how they hung him high and stretched him wide. When I touched the middle of the cross, I could sense his awesome power. Then I was reminded of how he hung on the cross from hour to hour. I could almost feel every bone in his feeble body. The crowd stood round. Some mobbed him. Oh, what strife. God gave his only son so that we could have everlasting life. Touching the bottom, tears filled my eyes. I know the angels in heaven cried. I could almost feel the nails that pierced his feet. That was the end of the cross that I've always seen. Jesus sacrificed his life, and mine he did spare. I know Jesus is real, real in my soul, for he alone has washed and made me whole.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is powerful.
Yeah.
But such a beautiful visual, the way that it's described, the words. It just, you're right there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I just touched the hymn book that day in the choir stands, and God just vividly showed me the depth of his love for me.
Oh,
just that
amen.
quick. Yeah.
We tend to forget when we get focused on our pain, you know, and of course life struggles. We forget that infinite love that can heal us of everything.
Yes.
Things that we think there's no way I can be healed of this. Oh my goodness, this is an amazing story.
Yeah, it really is, and I can't help but think of the young lady that's sitting out in the audience somewhere whose story is very similar to yours.
Yes.
And unfortunately and tragically, it is a story that we hear a lot.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, again, your story is one that's great because it's telling her, listen, number one, God does not forsake anyone.
Yes.
No matter what you're told in the world. And the second thing is that there are plans for you. I can imagine there were many times when you thought, this is it, I'm going to live, I'm going to eat, I'm going to die.
Yes.
That's my lot. And now, what an amazing story to have.
I'm so amazed that God does take the rejects.
Yes.
Yes. And makes them his trophies.
Yes.
His
And
trophies.
used for so many things. Tell us about your website, your organization as well, so people can connect with you there.
You can connect with me on Facebook. It's Unmasking, Mechelle Stevens on Facebook. Or you can check out the website at MechelleStevens.com, and it's spelled M-E-C-H-E-L-L-E, Stevens with a P-H, .com. And as well as my email is watchgodwork, W-R-K, at bellsouth.net, which is actually my nonprofit organization, Watch God Work Ministries, which gives financial assistance to those that are in need. So God is using that as an avenue to do outreach as well.
Oh, wow. Do you do this in the, because you live around the Powder Springs area,
I do.
right? So you're local.
Yes, it's Powder Springs, and we operate out of New Friendship Missionary Baptist Church in Powder Springs.
Okay, wonderful. And there's something else that God is doing with you with the book. What's coming out that's going to go with it?
What's coming out is actually the workbook that goes to Unmasking, and it's called Unmasked and Unashamed.
Wonderful.
And it's coming out of Psalm 51, and it's six topics. You understand that we all need to be saved. N, that once we're saved, we need to be naked before God. M, and after that's done, we're made over. Mask, unmask. A, we have an altered lifestyle, one that's totally sold out for Jesus. S, we go and look for soldiers. We're soldiers for Christ. We go back and get those that are lost. And K, we begin to live a kingdom lifestyle.
Beautiful.
Yes,
beautiful.
amazing.
You are such a blessing
Thanks,
and
God.
joy.
Well,
Thank
it's
you
just
for being here with us.
Once again, proof positive that God does some of his greatest work through some of his most broken vessels.
Yes, he does.
Amazing
Yes, he does.
to see the work you're doing. Thank you
Yes,
so
thank
much,
you.
Mechelle.
Thank you so much.
Please connect with Mechelle and get a copy of her book and her upcoming